we go. Anything funny you want to say for the beginning?
Like your fucking hat. That's pretty funny. It actually looks like you've got like a little hairband thing on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. I keep
it's
thinking you got a hairband. It's like when like people with long hair come out of the shower and they have like a hairband thing on. That's what it looks like right now.
how many times are you standing outside other people's showers waiting for them to come out with long hair?
I mean, I might be on a
No fly lists.
couple of police registers.
It's the least of your worries. Right.
On that note,
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Not Another Whiskey Podcast, a show where it's not just the edits that are half cut, it's also your hosts. Hey!
Hey!
Now, today's show is a close look at some of the people who make the whiskey industry tick, a deep dive into the unsung heroes, some villains, and the folks who've really helped shape the world of whiskey as we know it today, either by their insane talents or lack thereof. Which is a perfect segue into introducing my co-host today. Laddies and lassies, give it up for the talents of Mr. Mitch Bouchard.
you had to get that. You had to get that segue in there, mate, didn't you? Bastard.
Backhanded compliment, mate. Backhanded compliment. Anyway, how things, man?
Yeah, good man, good man. I'm looking forward to this one. Yeah, I think this is like you said, this is the first in our series where we're going to go down this road of being quite serious, which I know is a little bit shocking for some people. You know, we even had to put down our glasses for a minute and do some homework for this one. So that was pretty intense. That's pretty hard for you, Nicholas, as well, because I know you struggle with that concentrating thing, you know?
I know.
But
Adderall, please.
I wouldn't say we're going to have some academic banter on this episode. I wouldn't go that far, but we're definitely going to dive into some of the depths of whiskey lore, maybe unearthing some tales definitely around these unsung heroes who have been quietly rocking the whiskey boat. You know, and these guys that we're talking about, both in the past and the present within the whiskey industry, we're going to be talking about people. We're also going to be talking about distilleries, and these distilleries and people, they don't always make it to the spotlight, but they definitely should, in our opinion. Right, Nicholas?
Indeed. I mean, like you said, Mitch, we really had to put our thinking caps on and our very fetching tartan plaid. And let me tell you, like, deciphering through my scribbles of my malt-stained notes took a lot of work. But we're not just here to spill ink. We're here to spill a few secrets, the stories, and really kind of bring some of these processes and maybe a dram or two to life, right?
Yeah, man. What are you drinking today?
Nothing right now because it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
Point is?
Although I was waiting for that one. I do have a little bit of whiskey tasting to do later this afternoon, and like when you hear me talking about some of the heroes that I'm chatting about, like I was like pulling out some cast samples like at 8 this morning and nosing through some of them, actually nosing through some Dalmores and stuff like that, particularly because I'm going to talk about some kind of heroes in the sherry world. What about yourself? Are you actually having a dram at the moment?
Do you know what? I was just looking back and thinking, like, what am I going to have? But it's just coming into the weekend here. I'm almost ready for a dram, but not quite.
Are you doing a damp January?
Do you know? Yeah, damp's a good way of putting it, actually. Because
I know you're not
last
dry.
week, dude, it's not on purpose as well. You know me. I don't.
You've never done
buy
anything on
into-
purpose. Is that what you meant? Is that what you meant? You know me.
Definitely dry January. I don't go in for that on purpose. But last week I got a cold and it was a stinker, man. It knocked me for six. Like, I went down to Edinburgh, drove down there, did some stuff down there, and then just after that, I was just floored coming back up the road. So for that reason, mate, I haven't really been drinking an awful lot. I had a little dram last night, and I think it was the first time in a week and a half that I touched any booze. So can we mark that down as a record there? I think that's probably the longest dry spell I've ever had, maybe in my life. But yeah, it's been a fucking quiet week, mate. You know, January, just chilling out, not really getting up too much.
Yep.
Having a lot of laptop time, just getting a lot of planning done, which is not my jam at all. But I think you're the same as us, mate. We've been hit with a bucket load of snow here, so that's kind of hampered going out anywhere. I think we're up to about a foot right now of snow in Speyside, which is pretty insane to see.
Yeah, that is. Actually, funny enough, I'm looking at my office window right now, and the snow is falling.
Oh, is it?
children playing, having fun, shaking Stevens all over again. Yeah, but yeah, the snow is falling. I think we're going to get between, maybe 5, 6, 7 inches again today. But cumulative snowfall over the next 24 hours. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm looking forward to it. You know when snow falls and you get excited about it, and then you're like, yeah, you go out in it. It's still really nice. We were just out for a walk just now. It's still really crisp, and we actually walked right above the Daoyuan Distillery, and it's a blue sky day here in Speyside, and it just looks stunning looking over the mountains and everything. Yeah. But I'm kind of getting over the snow now. I'm like, all right, you can go away. Yeah, you're done. Nah, I'm done. Like 4 days for me, it's like Vegas. I just want to tap out,
Talk about coughs, you can tell I still got a little bit of a residual cold kicking through my chest at the moment, but that's I know what you mean, but I've started going in another direction where it doesn't bother me anymore. It used to be that point where when I was traveling all the time, it was such a inconvenience to have snow. All the flights would be delayed, the roads were a nightmare, like it was really tough. Now I'm more like, you know what, I quite enjoy it. I'm fully prepped for it. I keep my snow pants at the front door. Like I've got snow boots at the front door. Like there's like a big kind of rolled carpet that's out at the front door. So when you come in from the snow, you just kick your boots off there and that's it. I quite like that. So I think if you're prepared for it, but you don't care too much about what you look like. If you're trying to go out to a business meeting and you're dressed in like, you're walking around with a suit and a pocket square and Dapper Dan usually. So trying to put a snow jacket on top of that doesn't really do you justice. But for myself, dressed like a hobo.
Can I just translate for all the listeners in the UK? When Nicholas said snow pants there, he actually meant to say snow trousers, since he's turned American.
Oh, yeah.
Your snow pants, mate. Get your snow pants on.
Oh, my gosh, you're so funny. Yeah, my snow pants. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Right, listen, before we get into this, we got some housekeeping to do, right, Nicholas?
Yep.
Remember last week, listeners, we did a new section on Guess the Distillery. Now, I know everyone's been waiting on the answer with bated breath for this. I can feel the tension with our listeners as to what that distillery was last week. But as promised, we did put the clues up on our Instagram page, and we had a load of answers. So thank you so much for all those who made the effort to answer with all the clues. So a few people put in Bowmore, which was a good shout. We also had a few answers of Jura in there. Unfortunately, they were wrong. I'm not going to name and shame everyone, though, because that would just be a horrendous thing to do. But kudos to all those who wrote in with the right answer. And there was quite a lot of people who got this right. So, who got it right? Well, we had Matt, a.k.a. the Drambler, wrote in with the right answer. Ewan from Glenturret, shout out to my boy there, doing a great job hosting at Glenturret. Well done, Ewan. Paul, a.k.a. the Whisky Share, got it right as well. Funnily enough, Alistair Day got this right. And at this point, I'm going to say the answer because it was actually Rassy Distillery, and Alistair owns Rassy Distillery. So, Alistair, as I said to you, if you'd got that wrong, I would have given you a bit of a slag in there, mate. So, well done to you. Words of Whiskey got it right. Eric Letaire, I think it's pronounced, got it right as well. Ian Bruce and Ryan from 8 Doors Distillery all got the right answer of the Rassy Distillery.
Absolutely. So for this week, Mitch, for all those budding whiskey geeks out there who love that little bit of mystery, here are some clues to guess our next whiskey mystery distillery. So this Highland distillery dates back to the 19th century. It has burnt down at least 3 times, and at least once of those instances was under very suspicious circumstances. And before being modernised, up until 1963, the entire site was powered by water wheels and a steam engine. So those are your clues. Answers on a postcard. What am I? Who am I? What's
Who makes
my name?
a whiskey like this?
Exactly. Who would I be? So there you go.
Mate, I thought I knew this one, but then when you got to the water wheels and steam engine, that kind of put me off a little bit there. So yeah, I'm going to have to put my thinking cap on.
Aye.
But yeah, excellent sleuthing opportunities there for everyone listening. As always, we'll punch these up on Instagram, on our stories, get some feedback. Anyone gets it right, get a little shout out on the next show. But before we get into the Unsung Heroes, let's take a moment, I think, to acknowledge the real life unsung heroes of the whiskey world right now.
Thanks, man.
And I'm talking about...
Thanks. No, not me.
I'm not talking about you, mate. I'm not talking about you. No, I'm talking about all the tour guides out there, the coopers, the blending teams that assist the master blenders, teams working in production, the finance guys, the farmers that grow all the grains for Scotch whisky and other whiskies around the world, the amazing hospitality industry within bars, restaurants, and hotels around the world, all the staff in whiskey shops, and last but not least, the sales and marketing guys. So love them or hate them, we need those guys. So little shout out to all you guys that are working within whiskey right now that are the unsung heroes. We totally appreciate what you guys are doing. But I think for me, you know, the way when we did this, right, we looked at breaking this down into heroes past and present. And I'm going to go with mine first, Nicholas, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Mine is a mutual friend of ours, Dennis McBain, who has been the coppersmith. He's kind of semi-retired now at William Grant and Sons for Balvenie. And Dennis started the coppersmith role when he was just 16 years old. And a lot of people that have been to Balvenie would have met Dennis. Amazing guy, some incredible stories. You know, to start on this role when he was just 16 years old and still be at Balvenie and still have the passion for it is quite incredible. And I think, you know, he's been recognized by Balvenie on a load of occasions. So he kind of, I suppose he's one of the unsung heroes when it comes to whiskey. But big shout out to Dennis, a good friend of ours and amazing gentleman.
Very cool indeed. So first up for me, Mitch, another gentleman that you'll probably know, Mr. Ronnie Cox. Now, this is really personal for me because Ronnie's probably one of the main reasons that I do what I do now. He is a legend in the whiskey industry. Most people will know him for his time at Berry Brothers and Rudd. He's been in the whiskey industry for almost 50 years now. So Ronnie Cox, Red Sox, he's 7th generation in the booze business and Scotch whiskey business. He cut his teeth like old school, like way back in the day, going around like Latin America where it was sketchy as all hell, trying to like promote different booze brands and things, not just in whiskey at that time, but like ended up, I think 2 occasions, I remember him telling me a story, like in 2 occasions he said a gun pointed at his head. like that's wow. The absolute Wild West days. He worked for Distillers Company Limited and, you know, was out there kind of promoting Black and White and Buchanan's and all these kind of things, part of kind of Diageo's staple back out in the day. And then in the 80s, he kind of started to move into what would become Berry Brothers and Rudd. Like he'd cut across a couple of things, like he was working with Guinness in the kind of late 1980s, and his distilleries kind of bought, sold and trade hands. He basically was the guy that went out there and brought Cutty Sark to the Americas and Latin America. And then, you know, when it was all sold out to Edmonton, he was like basically part of all these guys that kind of moved around, and he basically took over Glenrothes. And most people who know Glenrothes as a whiskey and know that I am one of the biggest fans of Glenrothes as a whiskey company, know that Ronnie Cox was the face and just the absolute champion of that brand for so many years. He just embodied everything about it. He's an absolute raconteur, just real the gentleman's gentleman. He's a massive champion of Keepers of the Quake and a champion of all Scotch whisky, so he's heavily involved with keepers as a master keeper, and just really is one of those guys that is a joy to sit next to, a wonderful storyteller, a champion of his own brand, but a champion of the industry, and just one of those great dudes. It's a complete and utter inspiration to me as well to get into this business. And he's one of those guys, and we talk about this a lot on the show, Mitch, like the thing that we love about this industry is that people like Dennis as well, right? So as a coppersmith, you know, to have a coppersmith that makes that much of an impact on you is unheard of. And similar, you know, most people would think, oh, it's a guy that walks into a room and talks about whiskey, but Ronnie just leaves an impression everywhere he goes, and he's just a lovely human being.
Agreed with that, mate. Very cool. For my next personality, I'm going to go into the past. And I suppose this personality is celebrated at Laphroaig, but not really as much within the Scotch whisky industry. And it's Bessie Williamson. So Bessie was born in 1910. And she had a bit of a rocky start at the Glasgow University, which then kind of led into a job in a restaurant. But she then went on holiday in 1934 to an island that we know very well called Islay. There she heard about a temporary vacancy at the Lafroig Distillery. So little did she know this would lead on to become her career, and really she would blossom within the whiskey world here. So at that point in time, it was a gentleman called Ian Hunter who was running the distillery, and Bessie became the kind of right-hand man, the linchpin of Lafroig under Ian's tenure. When he passed away in 1938, she then assumed this more significant role, and in 1944, she officially took the reins of Lafroig. And this was really the first time we see a female taken ownership and management of a distillery in Scotland within the 20th century. So as a leader, she really navigated Lafroig through a lot of post-war changes and expansions as well. Her reputation got that well known that she was actually asked by the Scotch Whisky Association in the 1960s to go on tour in North America, sharing secrets of Scotch whisky production. So on this trip, it led to her meeting a gentleman called Wishart Campbell, who was a Canadian radio star, and that led to their marriage in 1961. So Bessie brought Wishart back to Islay, and they continued he started their life there, but she continued her career within Lafroig. So I suppose when you go to Lafroig, you hear about Bessie, and she wasn't just known as a businesswoman. She was really loved over there beyond just the distillery. She led the Scottish Women's Rural Institute, earning her an Order of St. John in 1963. She was also known as a person who really gave a lot of jobs to people on the island, to the point where she was kind of known just to be supporting the locals so much. Some of them had jobs that didn't really need to exist. But in the long term, she ended up selling the distillery to Long John Distillers in the 60s. She remained at the helm until her retirement in 72, steering the distillery through a lot of challenging waters and really pushing Lafroig to what it is today. So absolute legend within Islay, and I think it's also really important to we've talked about Helen Cummings on the show before, and I think Bessie's really cut from that lineage as well when it comes to this old school woman within whiskey that doesn't get talked about as much, which as we all like to do within the industry now, is really promote that side of the business, as we should be, because it's not seen as this male dominated industry anymore. So Bessie, right? Cheers to Bessie. Amazing woman.
What an amazing woman. I mean, like that role of things you were running off there, Mitch, I was like, holy heck, and she invented the cure for COVID-19. What about that? What an amazing person. Let's give her the credit for that too.
Dude, can you imagine running a distillery on Islay at that time? That must have been a tough gig. Yeah.
Absolute rock star. So then, Mitch, if you want another person, this is a pretty controversial one. This is someone who I genuinely believe is a hero in our industry, who would absolutely go unnoticed. And the reason I chose this person is because he has influenced so many of the biggest single malt Scotch whisky brands specifically in his talent. But unless you knew behind the scenes who this person was, this name would never come up. So the person I think is a bit of an unsung hero is Mr. Antonio Flores. Now, Antonio Flores is the master winemaker and master blender at Gonzales BS Sherry House. Now, this sherry house is the biggest provider of sherry casks into the Scotch whisky industry for the best barrels. So think of Macallan, think of Dalmore, those just two right off the bat that people think of as big sherry bomb whiskies. They're buying their barrels from Gonzales BS. But Antonio Flores has been making the wines there for 45 years. He is literally the Richard Patterson of the sherry world. Like him and Dickie Patterson are like two peas in a pod. Very, very good friends, and I think they've been friends for 30-something years, if not longer. This guy, Antonio, was actually born inside the bodega. So he was born on the floor of the sherry bodega. His mother gave birth to him inside one of these sherry houses. His father worked in the industry. He's only ever worked for Gonzales BS. So his entire life's work was dedicated to making some of the best sherries in the world. And that was it. From the age of 11, he was handed, literally a chalk, and told, look, go along, nose and taste these barrels, see what you think's impressive, start to score out some of these wines. And this is what he's dedicated his life to. The reason he's my unsung hero is because of the quality of what he does. We get some of the best barrels in the world coming into the Scotch whisky industry that shape some of those iconic single malt Scotch whisky brands. So, for those of you that have never tried sherry, go out and buy it. Go out and buy Gonzalez BS wines. They are absolutely breathtaking. Tio Pepe is probably the biggest known Fino sherry, which isn't something that we particularly use a lot of in the Scotch whisky industry. But their Olorosos, their Amontillados, their Palo Cortados are some of the best wines you'll ever get in your life, and definitely well worth going out and finding. But that's what I thought Antonio has brought to our game, and definitely somebody that would fly under the radar unless his name is brought to light.
I like that, mate. Very cool. And I also like the fact that I'm going to be going over to Spain, to Jerez, next month. So maybe we can get him on the podcast while I'm over there.
100%. Doesn't speak a lick of English, but he has a gentleman who follows him every single day, side by side, who is his translator. Because you can imagine everywhere he goes, people are asking him questions. So he's got somebody who literally follows him around and speaks and translates back and forth for him. Rock star. Yeah. Absolute rock star. Brilliant. Really cool dude. Actually,
nice, I like that one.
I'll tell you should speak to who'll give you could probably set up that introduction for you, is Daz. So he is still useful for some things.
No, he's not. I just spoke to him the other day. Anyway, moving on. But if anyone does have any good contacts over in Jerez, give me a shout, because I will be going over there for about 4 or 5 days towards the end of February. So looking forward to that. So I want to move this on, take it away from personalities. There's some amazing personalities that we've just mentioned there, but let's talk about distilleries, Nicholas. Now, for me, an unsung hero of the whiskey industry when it comes to distilleries is probably one that a lot of people might not have heard about, which is Kennet Pans. So Kennet Pans is situated on the Firth of Forth, just by the Kincardine Bridge on the Fife side. Now, I've actually done a video of this distillery, and I did it back sort of during lockdown. I went in there, and it was a good friend of mine, Tom Jones, not the Welsh singer Tom Jones, other Tom Jones that I used to work with in Diageo. We went round there, and we kind of, and it's amazing to see, because it's really kind of preserved back from the 1700s. And we did a video on it, and the owners of the building weren't too happy, so I had to take the video down. But anyway, that's a long story about me almost getting arrested. But it really is a significant distillery when it comes to, I suppose, the commercial production of Scotch whisky. So the story goes that the original site was a salt plain that was run by monks, and the Steen family learned the art of distilling from these monks, and then went on to build a distillery on the site there. So it actually dates back to 1720. We don't have an official date when the first bit of whiskey was made there, but we do believe, or we kind of know, I suppose, that it was the first distillery to produce on a commercial scale, to the point that by 1770, the amount of tax that was being paid on this whiskey was more than the land tax on throughout Scotland at the time. So it was owned and run by the Steen family, who eventually combined with the Haigs to become one of the powerhouses of whiskey making. But the Steens ran the distillery until 1825. At that point in time, they'd actually created another distillery just up the road, and it was one of the first distilleries to have its own railway track and steam train running between the two distilleries. So the Steens were really clever in what they did. The location of this distillery was right on the water, so they built a pier, and they actually had a fleet of 9 ships. Now, what was happening at this point in time was, you could argue that it wasn't really whiskey that was being made by the definition that we know of today. What the Steens were doing was they were actually shipping the liquid down to London, where it was getting rectified and turned into gin. Now, there came a point where the distillers that were making gin down in London got a little bit pissed off with this. So the laws were changed that basically put the taxes on the liquid that was coming down through the roof, and essentially put the Steens out of business at Kennet Pans. So by 1788, they were in debt to a tune of £500,000. Now that equates to about 150 million in today's money. They became so desperate at this point they even tried to bribe an excise officer and they got caught for it. So the Steens went into receivership at the same year, 1788. It then fell silent for 3 years and was passed on to John Steen Jr., where it stayed in production until 1825. But this distillery was really significant in that it proved that Scotland could produce whiskey on this commercial scale and was the first one to really do so. So if you are around about that area in Scotland by Kennetpans, Clackmannanshire is where it's based. I highly recommend a little visit down to it. I do have some amazing footage of actually going into the warehouses. It's this huge warehouse that still exists. It doesn't have a roof on it anymore. There's trees growing through it. It's unbelievable to see it. It is all kind of fenced off now, so it's tricky to get into. So if you do go down there, you can look at the site from the outside, but kind of really interesting spot to see when it comes to the history of Scotch whisky distilling. So that's me. That's Kennetpans. Nicholas, did you know about Kennetpans?
I did not. What a history lesson that was. Fantastic.
Every day's a school day, my friend.
Every day indeed. Yeah, that's super cool. Like, do you know what? See, when I was thinking about this, like, obviously you've gone a real deeper dive into it. And when people hear my distillery of choice, they'll be like, well, especially in Scotland, you'll be like, of course we talk about that, because in Scotland, this is quite a hailed distillery. But in the United States, every time I speak to people about this distillery, folk are like, oh, I've never heard of it, or I've seen it on the shelf and I don't buy it. And I'm like, this blows my mind. And the reason this distillery sticks out so prominently with me, it's an Islay distillery. My brother David, this is one of his favourite drams, and it was my brother David that gave me a dram of this for the first time to try, and I fell in love with it. I just thought, holy shit, like I'd never had... I don't really think I'd drank an awful lot of whiskey in my life up until this point anyway. You know, I'd probably had some Glenfiddich and some Glenmorangie and things like that, and maybe a few of the kind of lighter styles. But for me, this was Bunnahabhain. And Bunnahabhain Distillery, especially in the States, Mitch, and I don't know if that was the same when you were living out here, but like most people don't really know about it. Like they don't share the same passion that you maybe get for it. And I get it, like it's a smaller distillery, but I just think it's a gem. Like I actually don't think I've had a bad whiskey that they've ever created, that I've ever tasted. And that even includes some of the independent bottlings that I've tried, just because I think the quality of the spirit that they're buying is so good anyway. So this is the distillery. It dates back to 1881, obviously on the Isle of Islay. Bunnahabhain probably is such a problem for people in the States because it's a difficult one to spell and to look at and then to pronounce, right? So I understand 100%. That as well. And it's just one of these distilleries that it's, you know, it's known to be one of the milder styles. So it's not traditionally a heavily peated whiskey. In fact, a lot of the whiskies that they produce are non-peated. But just this, you know, it's such a remote little distillery. Even right up until 1993 was how it was predominantly accessed through ships. Like even there wasn't a road on the island up until the 1960s when they actually built a road to the distillery. But even then, up until 1993, they were still getting deliveries by ship because it was such a remote location into that kind of harbour mouth. It is hands down my favourite distillery on the island. I just think it's such a beautiful location. It just feels so tranquil, and it almost reminds me of the Scottish, you know, the movie The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like the Scottish version of that. Version. Isn't it? Like when you think about it now, then you're like, holy shit, like it's still got that kind of, you like the little natural harbour, like it kind of claws around itself and just protects the distillery right on the waterfront. It's just one of my most favourite distilleries. It's an unsung hero, definitely. You can get independent bottlings of like Duncan Taylor, Douglas Lang, the Boutique Whisky Company all do kind of independent bottling releases of it, and they're worth finding because they're all excellent. But Bunnahabhain's distillery own releases, I think the 12-year-old is probably one of the best 12-year-old whiskies on the market. Their 18-year-old is definitely one of the best bang for buck 18-year-old whiskies on the market. And then their higher end stuff, they've got 25, 30. I was very fortunate enough to try their 40-year-old maybe a few years back. And it's just wonderful. Then they've got some peated whiskies as well. Tochik was the last one that I tried. I don't know if you've had that. I've actually got a wee bottle of it sitting behind me as well. It's a nice wee dram if you like the kind of smokier stuff.
I'm with you 100%. Definitely an unsung hero. You'd like it even more now because their tasting room that they've recently built, and I think it the tasting room was probably like 3-4 years old, so I don't know if you would have seen it since you've been back to Islay, but they built it like right on the waterfront, so they've got this amazing patio. And now, before it would be like you could go onto the pier and then you'd see the water, but now you actually sit in the tasting room and take your dram outside. And last time I was there, to your point, super chill day, and the water was just coming in, just washing over the stone beach there, and it was just so tranquil. It was almost like putting me to sleep. A little bit like when I do this podcast with you.
Fair enough. Understandable. Well,
but no, I agree with you on the pronunciation, and I don't think they do themselves any favors with the way they name their expressions as well, because they're
Gaelic very traditional and very Gaelic forward, which is fine, right?
I love that juice. It's fantastic. Fantastic liquid. Yeah. Really
and it's not like it's so underpriced out here in the US market. It's probably priced in the same that you would find it in the UK, but the cost of everything up here tends to be a little bit more expensive just because of all the shipping, freight, cost, taxes and everything else. But it's not. It still sits on the shelf at, the 12-year-old you can pick up for under $40 a bottle, which is insane.
And they've got a 12-year-old cask strength out now, which I don't know if is available in the US, but it's
I've not seen it yet, but I'll keep my eyes peeled. And maybe the fine folks there at Distillery will like to get on board and ship a few bottles out here. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Mate, that's my jam, not yours.
I know. Mitch, it is time for Joke of the Week.
Yes.
So, but so I'm going to shift the game a little bit on you because this is quite funny. So, for those of you that know me, know I love like a crappy dad joke. So my business partners, Lauren and Rachel, sent me a joke a day calendar with dad jokes on them. And I'm just going to quick fire from the 1st of January to January 19th, a spitball of horrible, crappy dad jokes. So you ready? Right.
Let's go.
One after the other.
I'm ready.
Right. You should never tell someone that you love them on January 1st because it's only the first date. Did you hear about the houses that fell in love? It was a long distance relationship. What do you call a factory that makes okay products? A satisfactory. My wife asked me to put ketchup down the shopping list. Now I can't read anything. I entered the World Kleptomaniac Championship tournament. I took the gold, silver and bronze. I changed my iPod name to Titanic. It's sinking now. Oh my God. Why did Spider-Man's evil twin fail his driver's test? He was a bad parallel parker. Not too shabby. I'll let that one go. I struggle with Roman... I can't even read this one. I struggle with Roman numerals until I get to 159. Then it just clicks. Did you know books change colour after you finish them? They become red. What is the sleepiest fruit? The apricot. I got a parking ticket. I got a parking ticket yesterday, but I'm not sure why. The sign read fine for parking. What do you call a snowman's cell phone? A snowmobile.
Oh, no, that's a chuckle.
I have a pet newt called Tiny. I named him that because he's minute. If you ever name your own business, try selling stoves. You'll offer a range of hot products. Oh. Where does Sir Ian McKellen go to party? A nightclub. So what if I don't know what apocalypse means? It's not the end of the world. Once upon a time, there was a king who was only 12 inches tall. He was a terrible king, but he made a great ruler. For years, I've suspected that my wife has been adding soil to my garden. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged. The plot thickens. And last but not least, what do you call an apology written in dots and lines? A remorse code. What about that disaster?
That was... I'm going to give you 60% on that, mate.
Thanks, mate.
And then we're like, but some of them were fucking good.
Next time around, I'll get you just one joke that'll be a cracker, but I quite like those for Spitfire Banter. Thanks to Lauren and Rachel. Those are giving me a chuckle every morning when I peel off my calendar a day. Time for a giggle.
Well, guys, that brings us to the end of our semi-serious episode, our deep dive into whiskey, our unsung heroes. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Hopefully you agree with that. And there's probably a load out there. We can do maybe several episodes on this because there are so many unsung heroes within the whiskey world, and we raise a glass to all of you.
So, Mitch, we've got some pretty fun stuff coming up, some good guests and some interesting topics. What have we got coming up next week?
Right, next week, we just recorded a banger of an episode from all you rugby fans out there. You might remember Rory Jackson and Chris Cusseter, both Scotland internationals. We sat down with both of them because they're now in the whiskey industry in different roles. Chris over in California and Rory working for Glenturret. So we sat down with them. We chat all things whiskey, all things rugby. So that's going to come out next week, mate. That's a good one. The Six Nations is about to drop, and also there's a Netflix series about to drop about the Six Nations as well. So, it's like we planned it, mate.
It is like we planned it. Look at us ahead of the curve.
Right.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Instagram. Be sure to like and subscribe to Not Another Whiskey Podcast, wherever you're streaming your podcast for free. As always, your love allows us to continue to do this and bring this show to you ad-free for now and for free for now. On that note, we shall see you next week. Bye.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.